You're a qualified counsellor and you feel ready to take that next step. Counselling Tutor's Advanced Certificate in Clinical Supervision, including online and telephone working. Built for the busy counsellor, the course starts with self-directed learning inside the custom-built learning portal. The theory then comes to life in live tutor-led sessions where it's demonstrated and explained. And you get to practice it yourself with peers with observation and feedback from the tutors. This training is mapped to the BACP Supervision Competence Framework and is NCPS quality checked. Visit counsellingtutor.com, click on the Products tab, and select Clinical Supervision Training to download your information pack and course handbook.
Hello and welcome to episode 377 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I'm Rory, and today I'm delighted to be joined by therapists and educators Jane Godward and Tara Fox, authors of the new book, The Process of Becoming a Counsellor, Navigating the Transformation. I was kindly sent a promotional copy ahead of today's conversation, and I have to say it's one of the most useful books I've read for anyone thinking about training as a counsellor or already on that path. It tackles so many of the questions people wrestle with, from choosing a course and understanding modalities to managing the personal challenges that can come with training. What also struck me is this book just isn't a great resource for students, it's also full of ideas and insights that make it incredibly valuable for counselling tutors, especially those at the early stage of their teaching careers. So today, Jane and Tara join us to talk about the motivation behind the book, what they hope readers will gain from it, and why it could become an essential companion for both trainees and tutors alike. So with that said, let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Very warm welcome to episode 377 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly. Rory and I taking you on a journey of 3 destinations today, starting off with ethical, sustainable practice, where today we're looking at AI apps, depersonalisation. So how AI can depersonalise a relationship with a client. We then go into practice matters. Rory has already beautifully introduced the chat he had with Tara and Jane around their brand new book. So make sure you stick around for that one. And then we go into student services, where we're going to be discussing how to write a personal statement for a counselling course. And I've had a look over all that material that Rory has provided for that, and there's going to be a super duper handout for that as well. And you know what I've noticed, Rory, is that this would be useful as well for CV if you're applying for a job and you wanted to make a personal statement. So if you finish studying, stick around for that segment anyway, because a personal statement, very important piece of work. But we're starting off, Rory, as always, delving into AI, because it is the topic of the day, I guess. And we're speaking today about depersonalisation. And I guess we've been on a journey of looking at the questions that we might ask if we're looking to use a tool in our practice, or if our clients are saying that they may have used AI, and what the downsides of that can be. And one of them is called depersonalisation, and it's domain number 4 in the critical thinking matrix. We've done 1, 2, and 3 already. You can go back on the previous week's podcast. But what is depersonalisation, Rory?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question, Ken. And I think to start to answer that question, we have to look at what goes really to the heart of counselling and psychotherapy, and that is the relationship. And that relationship is built on empathy, it's built on shared humanity. I guess to some extent it's built on shared destiny. I read recently that one of the most powerful parts of 2 people meeting in a therapy room is the fact they're both mortal, and their time is limited by the time they'll be on the planet. And the relationship is the heart of the therapeutic change. All the research says that. But with AI, there can be a tendency for it to be depersonalized, because I think we have to remember, no matter how chatty it is, I mean, I switched my AI on and it says, "How you doing, Rory? Lovely to hear from you." But at the heart, it is still a machine. It's not a human being. It doesn't have a heart, doesn't arguably have a soul. And as a consequence of that, if you are offering apps that to help your clients, the thing to ask yourself is this going to depersonalize? This is going to give like stock answers, or is it going to be a rehearsed material, a rehearsed set of answers to the client? And really, anything we offer the client shouldn't bring any form of discomfort. It should feel as real as it possibly can. So we have to be careful that what we give and offer our clients doesn't depersonalize them, doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't sound like the best way I could describe this, doesn't sound like a vending machine. And we have to be very, very careful with this. And I think, as you'll allude to, Ken, this can be quite creeping. It creeps in. It can be dressed as, being efficient, or helpful at the end of a day, but sometimes it just feels a bit cold and a bit distant.
Very, very much so. It's a very interesting topic, and it's an often hid topic that it doesn't immediately show itself. It takes a little bit of critical thinking to identify this one. So the question is basically the heart of this is, am I relying on AI for answers about my client, or am I still in a real informed relationship with them? Now, there's two sides to this. There are mood tracking apps, and we've spoken about these before, or apps that our clients may use in between sessions. Some of them we may even recommend. They may even be digital mental health tools that we suggest that they use in between sessions. And there, the depersonalization is maybe very easy to understand. It's an app. It's not me. It's not the real therapist. You're having a chat with an AI model, so it's not going to be as personalized. It may be easier for the client to understand that and for us to explain it to the client, and a lot easier to see. But there's the other side of this, and I think this is the side that is less seen, but it requires some critical thinking. And it's around the tools that we as therapists may use in our practice. Is there a risk of the tools we use depersonalizing our interaction with our clients? So I'm going to give an example of this. Let's say, for example, I have a HIPAA compliant note-taking application that I'm going to meet with my client online, and it's going to record that session, everything that is said by the client and by me, but everything is protected, all the data is protected. So we've ticked all those boxes, yeah. So we can say, oh, well, that's very useful. I can then use that to create a summary of that session with the client. I can share the session notes with the client, or a summary of what was covered, and we're assuming that all the boxes of data protection have been ticked here, and this is a specially built product that does this job. Well, within that is this risk of depersonalization, because although every single word that client spoke and that the therapist spoke within that session may have been looked at by the AI, what didn't it see? Well, it didn't see previous sessions from that client. It didn't see their body language. It didn't see the tear in their eye as they mentioned something. It didn't see that exhalation of breath, that heaviness that they demonstrated when they covered a certain topic. So it can depersonalize and say, if the person said this, then the research indicates that this might be an effective way of treating that. That if A, then we're going to apply B. That is depersonalization right there. So that's an example of how it can kind of creep in. We need to hold that relationship and the interpretation of that relationship with our clients. And I'm just thinking, Rory, we have a course in working with autistic clients. And one of the first things that is said in that course is, when you've met an autistic client and you understand what autism is, then you understand one autistic client.
Yes.
Just because a next client comes along and they say, you know what, I am autistic, they're not going to present in the same way, and you're not going to see them as the same way. You're not going to say, autism, right, well, there we go. I've got a big stamp now, and this stamp equals autism. It doesn't. It's a unique individual, and the same is true of all of our clients. And if a client came in to you, Rory, and started speaking about grief, you would work with them in a certain way. You can have the very next client come in and bring grief, and you would work with them differently because of who they are and how they've presented, what their family structure is, and you personalize. And we as therapists personalize everything we do with our clients. So we need to just be aware of this depersonalization. It's so easy, and it can creep in when we're not looking, Rory.
It can. And I think what you're speaking about, Ken, is idiosyncratic. As therapists, we tailor our responses to the person in front of us. And that's based on how we know them, how we meet, how many sessions we've had, their cultural context, their history, relational patterns, and what might be harmful to the clients. And there's a lot going on there. So if you're sitting in front of somebody, you may be balancing out a lot of what's been said in previous sessions, and also, and I think this is pretty crucial, you're seeing how the person presents in the therapy room, and it may be that they come in and they slump in the chair, and you say to them, "How's things today?" And you go, "Oh, I'm all right, I'm fine," and you say you're fine, but I noticed that you kind of slumped in the chair, and they might go, "Well, actually, things aren't all that good." All these things really an AI can't see. They don't have the totality of the clients, and also at the end of the day, it's a robot. Can I give you an example, Ken? I've just thought of a wonderful example that I've brought up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So me and Mrs. Counselling Tutor went to visit a new tea room this week, and I put it in my sat-nav, and the sat-nav is an AI robot in my car, and it'll just guide me. Very, very helpful, very procedural, very, very useful. However, I noticed that it took us on a route through a boring grey industrial estate, which was horrible to look at. So I rerouted and went down the country roads, and eventually we got to our tea room, and we had a lovely, lovely journey. And I think that kind of sums up the difference between using a computerized product to take you from A to B, and an idiosyncratic way of thinking to think, well, okay, we could get there that way, but actually the journey will be much more enhanced, much more thoughtful, because Mrs. Counselling Tutor loves a nice journey, and so do I, to be fair. So we went in a different direction. That's something that the sat-nav could never, ever understand, could never, ever contemplate, because they are machines, they're robots.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful example. It really is. And that is idiosyncratically matched to you and Mrs. Counselling Tutor. Maybe somebody else would want the quickest, fastest route of getting to that tea room, and they would then choose to go down the boring industrial route because they're going to get them there 3 minutes faster. But it's matching the person that you're with. And we're not saying AI is terrible and bad. We're saying we need to be aware of these questions, so that if we are using an AI tool or considering using an AI tool within our practice, or we're asked by an agency or by the place we work, the NHS, for example, to use an AI tool, that we're asking the question, is there a risk of depersonalization here, that we're awake to it, that our eyes are open. And I think back, Rory, to training. I think about all the work that is done on culture, difference. We learn so much about difference when we are training, to be able to take the scales off our own eyes, to be able to see people as human beings, who they are, not as the stories we might have grown up with, or the interjections that we may have got, or the misinformation, or the typecast, or any of that kind of stuff. We try to break through that and see every individual as a unique individual in front of us. And there's a lot of work, and I know that it's called for, that even in CPD now, all of our CPD, we put it through for quality check with NCPS. They're looking, is equality and diversity covered within that? It's in every counselling training course, every CPD course. And of course, this is something that the AI is not able to see. It cannot take that into consideration. It's our job. It's our job. So we just got to look out for that that risk that may creep in. The AI is not going to see the body language. It's not going to see the shoulders drop. It's not going to see those eyes welling up. It's not going to hear that sigh, as we've mentioned already. The silence. When we have silence within our therapy, it is a therapeutic moment. Silence could be the most powerful, amongst the most powerful parts of the therapy session. Well, to any AI tool that is looking over a transcript or looking over a session, silence is nothing. It doesn't see anything there. There's so much that can happen in that silence. It is so important. Like you say, Rory, the moment the client says, I'm fine, but we see, we perceive, we sense even. We even sense, that client maybe is not fine. How do we do that? Because we've traveled the road with them, we've maybe been with them for months, weeks, years in some cases. We've been maybe through ruptures in our sessions and repairing those and understanding what that looks like. We travel a journey with this person.
Yes.
In the same way, I've been married to my wife now. We're getting on to our 27th year. We were just planning what we're going to do for our anniversary. If I had to go and ask a bot about marriage guidance, it would give me a very generic answer. It doesn't understand the 27 years that we've traveled together and how unique that is and how different the advice for us might be to the advice to somebody else. And I guess one of the things I wanted to mention here, Rory, there's we mentioned a few sessions ago of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, since we started covering AI, we looked at the 3 different areas: digital mental health tools, which are specifically built, the off-the-shelf LLMs that a client may go to or that we may use from time to time, but we know what they are and they're not built for therapy. And then there's this messy middle. There's these tools that are maybe advertised as being really useful to therapists. And one of them I was looking at just recently, and it suggests that it will help you as the therapist with interventions. You tell it how your client is presenting, and it's going to tell you and suggest interventions. This is why these are so dangerous. I can't think of anything more depersonalizing than something that is going to suggest interventions. And even if it goes and looks at the research and says, based on what you've presented here, the research clearly indicates if A and B, then you got to definitely suggest C. That is not always true at all, is it, Rory?
No, and I will come back to the sat nav in your car. I can remember going somewhere and the sat nav taking me down a country road that nearly took the suspension off my car because there were so many potholes, and we ended up in a field. And there's signs, isn't there, that says don't use your sat nav. Have you ever driven down the road and it says,
yes,
large vehicles don't follow sat nav, because you end up in a field or you end up stuck in a little narrow lane that you can't get out of. And I think that's a good kind of metaphor for using AI, because without the human touch, without that nod to it's the journey, not the destination. In other words, through the journey, there'll be many twists and turns. And Ken, anybody who's actually been a supervisor and had a supervisee sat in front of them, pulling themselves apart, saying, I'm not sure where to go with this client. I'm not sure I'm enough. I'm not sure. I don't know where which direction me and the clients are going. You realise that no machine could ever replicate that existential angst that comes up in supervision, and that very human need to be human for the client. And I think that's where we're going with this. We don't want to end up in the middle of a field with a sat nav that's gone wrong. You could imagine, couldn't you? Saying, "Well, I asked the AI, and the AI said this." The client's like, "Don't really want this." We have to tailor our interventions to where the client is, and crucially, where the client wants to go.
Yeah. Beautifully said, Rory. And to close it off, it's what are the questions we ask in this domain? So the domain is about depersonalisation. You're looking at a tool and that you might use in your therapy room, or you've got a tool that you're using already, or your work is asking you to implement a tool. Here's the questions for you. Could the tool lead to depersonalised therapeutic experience? Does it prioritise human interaction and the therapist's role, or push them to the edge of the work? Could it undermine trust, rapport, or the client's sense of autonomy? And I think that relates to what you've just mentioned, Rory. If we're just taking a cookie cutter, cut and paste response and giving it to a client, does that undermine that trust, the rapport, the client's sense of autonomy? Does it leave room for your clinical judgment? That's what you're trained for. Or does it impose a rigid process? If you find yourself following the tool's structure rather than your client's needs, it's a sign worth paying attention to.
Yes.
And then finally, could your clients experience this tool as a replacement for human support? We started this by saying, maybe mood tracking apps or in-between session apps, and they're becoming more and more popular. Sometimes even a therapist may be asking a client to turn to those. Could a client experience that as a replacement for the human relationship because it is so good, because it is so convincing? Could it shake their relational foundation of therapy so that they're looking to the tool rather than to you? These are the kind of questions. I'm going to leave you with some reflections in your practice for now. What tools, if any, are you currently using and that sit between you and your client? And can you apply this critical thinking to those? And then when you read an AI-generated summary, and there's some digital mental health tools that are being built with great oversight, with clinicians involved, that are being tested at the moment. They are dedicated tools to summarize interactions between therapists and clients. When you read an AI-generated summary, do you notice yourself accepting it and its framing, or do you find yourself reaching for what is missing in that? So what is actually recommended in these tools, and you will come across them in time, believe me, because they're being rolled out, is that it's very good. It'll do a summary, and you can read over that summary and go, that's really good, that. But you're asked to read over those summary, to make any adjustments so that you can undo any depersonalization. And then, when was the last time your understanding of a client shifted because of something that happened in the room that no transcript or interpretation of the session could ever have kind of taken in? Have a think about that. What are those human-to-human magical moments? And where does the line sit for you? This is, at the end of the day, these are the critical thinking questions that we ask ourselves. It's your practice. You make these decisions. At the bottom line is your practice, your decision. We are accountable. So depersonalization, it's just another one of those questions we need to ask, Rory. And there's a super duper handout, isn't there? Where are they going to get that from?
Well, that's a very good question, Ken. And I would say the answer to that, not using any AI at all, is if you go to episode 377 of the Counselling Tutor podcast. So to do that, you need to go to Counselling Tutor, the website, go to the podcast tab, episode 377, find the show notes that you can be able to download the handout, and it's there in your inbox waiting for you.
Thank you. Yes, and this is another topic that is taken from the book that I wrote on this topic. This is an important topic that we're called on by our ethical bodies to be looking at right now. Our insurers are calling us upon us to look at. Our clients are calling upon us to look at this in a critical thinking way, and that is ethical AI in counselling and psychotherapy. And if you are interested in that book, you can now, it's now available. Go to ethicalaipractice.com. It's run by Counselling Tutor, and all the information of the book, what's in the book and where to get the book, is right there on that page. And that, Rory, is today's ethical sustainable practice, which takes us straight into Practice Matters, where, Rory, you met up with Jane and Tara about their new book, The Process of Becoming a Counsellor, Navigating the Transformation. And my goodness, is there a transformation in that process, Rory?
Absolutely, that is an absolute true statement of what's the book stating what's really very, very accurate. It's a really, really good book. It's a generic book for anyone considering taking a counselling course. And also I'd say it's a useful one for practitioners as well, because there's a lot of good revision in there, a lot of very basic first foundations of thinking. I caught up with Jane and Tara, and this is what they had to say about their new book.
If you're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got one that could do with an upgrade, WebHealer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners £100 off the cost of a website design and build. WebHealer specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's all they do. Their team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution so that you can focus on your time with your clients. They've been doing this for over 20 years and are a trusted name amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. Get the full package details and claim your £100 off coupon at counsellingtutor.com/website.
Training to become a counsellor can sometimes feel like a confusing journey. There are so many questions at the start. Which course should I take? Should I train at a university, a college, or with a private training provider? How long will it take to qualify? What is the modality? And how do I begin to make sense of it all? And alongside academic learning, what personal challenges may I encounter along the way? These are just some of the questions I used to hear time and time again as a tutor. The good news is that many of them, along with so much more, are explored in a new book by counselling lecturers Jane Godward and Tara Fox. Their book, The Process of Becoming a Counsellor, Navigating the Transformation, offers support, guidance and reassurance to people considering training, as well as those already on the path. Jane and Tara join us today to share what inspired them to write the book, what they hope readers will take from it, and how it may be of real service to anyone considering becoming a counsellor or currently in training. So welcome Jane Godward and Tara Fox. So I always start interviews regarding books and I always ask the authors, what inspired you to write The Process of Becoming a Counsellor, and why did this feel like the right time for a book like this?
Yeah, I'm Jane, and I was working for a small training organisation and running it, and I was taking enquiries from different people who'd ring up, and they all wanted to become counsellors, but really people didn't know what was involved in this. They didn't realise that they had to do so much work on themselves when they became a counsellor. They thought it would just be a continuation from other courses they'd done before. It was just like a means to an end. So the idea at first was for it to be like a guidebook to help people through the process. But when Tara and I joined up to write the book, we started to get interested in this idea of the shift, a shift that goes from being a novice or a skills user to someone being a practitioner who can work with vulnerable people in a competent way. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to demystify the process and support people in navigating this transformation. I'd had a student in a group once, in a PD group, personal development group, had said, I feel like all my insides have been taken out and now I don't know what to do with them. And, and no matter how many times we kind of warn people what they're taking on, they don't really understand it. So I think we were trying to capture a bit of what would happen, the personal challenges and that kind of thing. Do you want to say something like that, Tara?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how, like you were saying, students think it's a means to an end. This is what I want to be. So they're thinking about the end goal. I want to be a counsellor. I want to have my own practice, or I want to work in the NHS or whatever. But they're not thinking about allowing enough space around them for them to develop into this role, and not realising that they will have to kind of cut things out of their life in order to make space for them to grow within this process. And so I think that's what the book does. It gives people a chance to realise that there is a process that they're going through, and they will need a lot of space around them to kind of grow into that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would both your experiences would mirror my experiences as a tutor, in that occasionally people come to counselling thinking that it's just another course. I have to hang around for 3 years, put in a few assignments, and after that I'll be able to be a counsellor. And of course, as you rightly say, Jane, there's a huge difference between acquiring some counselling skills and becoming a fully fledged practitioner. It is a profession now, and quite a in-depth profession. Competency is really the key in service of clients. So, Tara, when you were planning this book with Jane, who did you have in mind as your ideal reader?
The ideal reader, the person I was thinking about, was the person that's feeling quite unsure about whether this is the right thing for them, wanting to know what they were getting themselves into, really. Wondering what they're signing themselves up to. So it was partly about that, but partly also about students that have started, and then, when they start and then they think, hang on a minute, what have I signed up to here? I didn't realise I was now going to have to talk about myself and bring my own vulnerabilities. I thought I was going to learn about helping other people to, look after their own mental health. So, those students that I had in mind were the ones that are thinking, hang on a minute, I've got to put myself in this process and I can't keep myself out of it. And also the kind of internal dialogue that students have with themselves, that kind of introspection that all students go through. I really wanted this book to be a support for that internal dialogue. Almost like there's a companion here within this book. Somebody gets it, somebody understands what I'm going through, and that this is part of the process. Yeah,
it does. When I read it, it kind of struck me. It does feel a little bit like a little companion you can keep. And if you need a bit of reassurance, you just pop in and have a look. And I could see that. I wish I'd had this as a student, because I could have used it and taken it away from maybe lessons that I've had in class, and just kind of read up and made sense of it there. But I do think, in terms of the meeting new students and trying to explain what can sometimes be an in-depth process, it's going to be an invaluable book, and I think it's one that should really, I'm going to be directive. It should be on every college library's reading list, really, because I think it's going to be of great service. So, Jane, the book starts with the chapter titled "The Training Process." Why did you choose to begin the book there, and what makes it such an important starting point for becoming a counsellor?
I think I'm going to let Tara do that, because she wrote the chapter, but I think we thought that was like the beginning, like very important to start with the overview. But I'll let Tara talk about this, because it's a chapter.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I mean, I wanted to start it there because I think sometimes students become quite impatient. So they're thinking like, what is why am I sitting here having to be in this group? Why are we talking to each other about our life experiences? I am here to be taught something. And I am not getting that. And so I wanted to make the process transparent. The reason why tutors are doing this and inviting you to look at this is for a reason. And everything that the tutor do is actually quite skillfully designed in order to generate new insight, new awareness, so that can inform their way of being as a therapist. So I've included a couple of good examples there that show how the learning would be generated through those discussion and experiences on the course.
Yeah, and I found that very reassuring. Again, if I put myself in the shoes of someone starting off, just to understand what the process is like and how the teaching may be laid out. Again, really, really helpful. And I've seen it sort of addressed in other books, but not in such a straightforward way. And I guess that leads me on to one of the other chapters that stood out for me, because I did read the entire book. It was very nice. Once I picked it up, I couldn't put it down. And I think one of the questions asked, and I'd never, ever considered this question, but it is such a fundamental question, is what sort of a counsellor do you want to become? And I've never seen that in any other books. So what was the thinking about writing that as a chapter?
I really wanted to write that. It wasn't an easy chapter to write because I don't like doing things about theory, but I included different types of theory that students needed to know about, because what's really important is that students choose the right course for them personally. What do they believe in? What are their values? I work with level 3 students as well as diploma students, work with students on certificates, and they're now at the point where they're choosing their next steps into diploma courses. And I'm really keen for people to choose the right course for them, because I've known students go on to diplomas and found like the counselling approach isn't right for them, or the type of teaching or the institution they're in isn't right. So this book looks at different aspects, things to consider, the factors, and we have quite a checklist in that. I also share my experience as well to bring it alive, and also I had 3 other people who talked about their choices, and just to give a range really, because you might have a course that's round the corner from you, you might have a course that's on a weekend that fits with your life. However, that might not be the right course for you when you actually get on it. And what's really sad is when people start a course and they actually end up leaving it, spending all that money that it costs to go on a diploma, and then they don't succeed. So I think I felt passionate about that, but I also thought people need as much information as they can, and I've recommended it to my level 3 students to look at, and hopefully they are looking at it. And there is a little quiz. You think you quite like this quiz, didn't you, Tara? On
it's brilliant.
What do you believe in? What's your philosophy on helping people? That kind of thing, and just to get to help a little bit with that decision.
And I think it does, Jen. I've used it with students as well when I'm teaching, and they can then see, oh, actually, I'm aligning more to this way of, more of a cognitive kind of approach, moving away from a person-centered approach. So it does help people to identify what they might want in their integration if they're going to go for an integrative way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important, because just saying it's the integrative course or a psychoanalytical course or humanistic course, it makes perfect sense to us because we know the detail of these courses. But to someone from the outside, as you say, who's invested a huge amount of money in training, it sometimes isn't that clear, even though you explain it. So again, this companion of a book is so useful to explain that. And you're absolutely right. I know in my training, we did some feedback at the end, and one person actually wrote, I think I was on the wrong course for 3 years.
Oh, no.
And the tutor looked appalled. Everybody looked at each other to work out who this person was. It wasn't me who wrote it. I thoroughly enjoyed my training. But when we found out who it was, and it didn't take long, it was understandable given the type of person this, I won't say too much more, the person was. I think they would have been better on a CBT type of course. And I guess that, along with modality, we do look in training at diversity. There's so many models of it, but I like what you've done, that you've included something called the social graces. It should be pronounced graces because there's so many A's in it. What led you to putting that particular model in the book?
Yeah, thanks, Rory. I decided to include that model in the book because it's a good way of people looking at their own identities. It's the fact that we've got multiple identities rather than a fixed identity. And those multiple identities, some of them are hidden, some of them are visible. So looking at the model itself, it helps people to look at, which of these identities do I have, and which of these are marginalized, which of these are, have I experienced oppression for or prejudice? Which do I choose to hide? Which are known or which are visible? So it's getting people to think about different identities and within themselves, but also when they're working with clients as well, in terms of how those intersect. How is my identity intersecting with the client's identity? So it's quite a handy little exercise in there to work with a partner that I've encouraged students to work with. And I suppose in a way, a tutor might look at that and think, okay, I'm gonna screen grab that, I'm gonna share that and get my students to discuss that.
Absolutely. So what you're saying, Sarah, is there's some good lesson plans in this book for any potential tutors.
Yeah. And I think that chapter particularly is helpful to tutors because I was writing that and struggling a little bit with, diversity within a group. And it actually writing it helped me with that. And I think there's resources in there that tutors could use as well as help themselves with it, support them. And there was something really big came out of that chapter. It was challenging for me, but also what came out was that we can't attempt to create safe spaces as tutors sometimes, but we can attempt to create brave spaces for students to look at. Because a safe space might be just too safe. You might not end up approaching or broaching diversity. You might end up avoiding it. And also, whereas a brave space, you need to kind of tackle some of these issues if students are going to go out and work with clients. So it was quite interesting. The whole thing was interesting doing that chapter. I think we both found that, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, people get very uncomfortable thinking about the aspects of their identity, don't they, that's privileged, especially when they were talking to another partner about that. But it just allows people to start to think about it and work through some of that kind of embarrassment maybe that they might have about some of that privilege, or to confront some of the fears that they've got from experiences of oppression for different identities that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that these conversations are really important. And I'm going to pick up on what you said, Jane, in the training spaces should be constructed to be safe. But as we used to say to students, you might not always feel safe in them. No. And it's a bit like a safety harness. A safety harness should be safe, but someone in a safety harness dangling off the edge of a cliff might not feel safe. And it's a subtle difference, isn't it? And as part of that safety piece, I think that sometimes not feeling very safe is actually kickstarts personal growth.
And it's about people being outside. Often, sometimes students say, I'm a bit outside my comfort zone here and that kind of thing. But that's where the learning takes place there, isn't it? When they're in groups and they're working together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would totally agree. That's where the more than learning experience takes place. It's not just about the facts and the theories. It's about who you are. and the ability to meet clients where they are. I think that is important, which leads me on to my next question. There is a strong thread that runs through the book about the importance of meeting potential students where they are and recognising that personal development is just as important as learning theory. What feedback have you had from students on that approach?
I was going to start by answering this, and think firstly the first point about meeting students where they are. I don't think you can do it any other way, really. You have to be able to meet people where they are, and everybody's an individual that comes on a course with the different values and beliefs, so we can't ignore that, and that links with the diversity, doesn't it? And there's no perfect counsellor or counselling student. So we have to start where people are. And most people that are drawn to counselling training have had issues themselves. You don't just end up on a counselling course, particularly at diploma level. There's a reason. That's partly why we included the Wounded Healer chapter, where it looks at where people are coming from. But in terms of what students have said, some of that's looked at in the chapter on the shift, where people talk about what's happened to them and how they've developed themselves. So what we're doing often is we're working with people come along and they're engaging with the course, but they've got wounds and they're healing those wounds as they're going along. They're going into personal therapy, they're using supervision, they're using the personal development group so that they can move on. So, I think that's the work we're doing as trainers quite often. But what do you think, Tara, about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the personal development aspect is almost more important than the theory, but the theory can help them to understand themselves. So, encouraging students to read up and discover themselves in the reading and then apply theory to understand themselves. So it should really be the student going through and navigating an understanding of themselves and applying theory to understanding themselves. And I think that's assessed, isn't it, through assignments that we have around personal awareness and growth and journaling and what have you. But yeah.
Yeah, can I say about your other question about what they say, sort of thing, the students?
Yes.
Often it's a profound experience. I know myself going through my training, it's one of the best things I've ever done, that personal development work. But this is what we hear from students in our, I'm saying we hear it, I'm sure Tara hears it in her groups, in the personal development groups, how people have grown and developed and they've become, different people. But I think the shift chapter does emphasise that, because with 3 accounts from people showing what the development's been for them. Not everybody likes it, though, because you're having to look at yourself. You're not just doing the theory stuff. Some people are very good at writing theoretical essays, but they're not so good at doing the other bit. And that links into the book again with the challenges to people, emotional challenges as well.
Absolutely. And I think that counselling training should really replicate, maybe to a certain degree, what clients may experience in the therapy room.
Yeah, I agree.
Because then you've got a really good sense of what a client may experience. I mean, I always ask at the end of every interview about a book, what would one key message you'd like the reader to take away from the process of becoming a counsellor, and what do you hope it'd be?
Oh, that's quite a hard question. I think I would say it's personally challenging but transformative and rewarding, and hopefully people, by using the book, by being guided by the book, they'll achieve that, hopefully.
Yeah. Thanks, Jane. And for me, I would say have faith in the process, because the process is a thing. So often students will say, I don't know where I am yet, I'm not there yet, well, you're not where you were before. So it's that constant checking in that I am in part of a process, and that is a thing in itself, and just to have faith in that. And that's what we have to do, isn't it, with clients? We have to have faith in the process, that the client is working at the pace that's right for them, and they will get there when it is right for them at the right time for them.
Well, it's certainly an inspiring book, and I'm glad I have it in my library. The process of becoming a counsellor Navigating the Transformation by Jane Godward and Tara Fox is published by Routledge and is available now from your preferred book supplier. It just remains for me to say, Jane Godward and Tara Fox, thank you so much for joining us.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com. Massive thank you to Jane Godward and Tara Fox. Interesting discussion, a really interesting book. Process of becoming a counsellor. Yes, what a process it is. Thank you. And thank you, Rory, for having that conversation. We now move on to student services. And today we're covering a topic in student services that I think applies not just while you're a student, but when you go out and you're looking for work, looking to work in an agency, putting in job applications. It's how to write a personal statement, where we're going to focus on writing it for a counselling course. But of course, that could also be a counselling job as well. Rory.
Yes, I think it's not unusual for those certainly who are moving into practice-based training. So I'm talking about diploma and above. Those courses where you will be at some point working with vulnerable people, working with clients. And what does happen, and what's happening more and more from my observation, is that tutors are asking you to include a personal statement. And let's have a look, I think, at what tutors are often looking for. Now, we know that counselling training, certainly at practice level, is a big step. It's a massive, massive commitment. And writing a personal statement can feel really like the hardest part of doing it. And I think there's many people wonder what to say, how personal should it be, and how they show they're ready for training. So it's not about sounding impressive. It's about showing that you are, I guess, thoughtful, genuine, ready to begin the personal journey, personal and professional journey of becoming a counsellor. So if we look at what makes a strong personal statement, I think what I would look for, and I'm sure what we look for when we talk, was authenticity, people being real. What we don't want is a press release. You know what we want to know about. We wanted to know about you. Your tutors want to know about who you are, and generally speaking, I think tutors are more interested in sincerity and self-awareness more than imperfect wording. And I can attest to that, because when I did my personal statements, I'm sure grammatically it was a complete car crash. However, it was real
from the heart.
Definitely real, including all the typos and everything. And I eventually, of course, got onto the course, and I guess that part of that journey is showing why you want to be a counsellor. Explain why you want to train. What is it that interests you? And it should feel grounded and insightful. A statement such as, "I want to become a counsellor because it'd be great on my CV," I don't think isn't going to go very far, to be honest. We're looking, and I say we as almost as if we're still, we're still training students at practice level, Ken. But what we look for was people who are genuine and really wanted to help other people, because at the core of counselling, it's about one person trying to help another, be of service to another. And also, I think understanding the training journey. It's a lot more than writing a few assignments and turning up to class. It's a personal journey. It's the willingness to kind of look at yourself in the mirror and think, who am I becoming? Who do I want to be? And of course, there is theories of skills. And also, I think, Ken, it's a capacity for self-reflection. One of the things that we would have looked for is some indication that you can challenge or look at or assess your own values and personal development. And also, I think, Ken, and you might want to speak to this, relevant experience. Have you done anything outside of study that might link in?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, relevant experience, who are you, what you've done, why you're doing this. You've covered them beautifully there, Rory. And I want to once again just touch on the point, where we are at the moment in the academic year, you may be quite a way off from putting in a personal statement for a new course. And that's why I want to expand this on, maybe you're coming towards the end of your training and you're thinking about a job. It's the same formula. Nothing changes. A job application needs to be put in with a personal statement, and all of the same points apply. And this will stand you in good stead for the entirety of your career. That first one, authenticity. If you think about it in counselling, it's about that congruence. And the way I look at this is I get phone calls from time to time. I pick up the phone, and within 10 seconds, I know if that's a real person being their genuine selves that wants to talk to me, or if it's somebody trying to sell me something. And so do you. And the reason that you can tell it so quickly is because there's a lack of authenticity within the voice. You can hear it straight away, and you can see it if it's written as well. So really be yourself. Dare to be yourself, because yourself will shine through. And as Rory used in your experience, Rory, of kind of applying for your course, it was messy, but it was the true messy self, and that was what was.
Yes,
it shone through.
It shone through.
So that clear motivation, this is going to stick with you for the entirety of your career as well. It's your why. We've spoken about it on the podcast before. Your why is what you go. It's what drew you into this. It's why you're doing it. We don't become counsellors to become rich and famous. We do it for very specific reason. What is your why? And it's going to be individualistic. It's going to be yours, and it's your anchor. It's your anchor when you're training and you're writing a personal motivation. It's your anchor when you're looking for a job. It's going to always be the thing you come back to. It's your North Star. When you get lost, you look up and you can see your why, and you can realign to that. Put it in. Rory mentioned understanding the training journey. All that would change in that is understanding the company that you're going for. So if this is now for work, you're just going to look up who that company is, why they do what they do. Does their why align with your why? How do they work? Is that something that you can understand? And you'd weave that into your personal statement. The capacity for self-reflection is going to be with you for the rest of your career. We're called upon as counsellors, psychotherapists, to be looking at ourselves all the time. The journey into self is the biggest journey any of us take. It's the biggest transformation any of us experience. It's from that self-reflection and explaining that, putting that in words, and showing that part of self and what you do is really important. And then where you left off and handed over to me, Rory, is that relevant experience, of which, of course, if you're going for a job, it's going to be different to if you are going into studies, but maybe not that different. Maybe in a job, you've just finished your studies and you're now looking for work at an agency. Your relevant experience is probably going to be the same as you put on your personal statement when you went into studies, except for maybe placement experience that you may have gained there. But relevant experience, it doesn't have to be in counselling and psychotherapy. It can be helping. It can be just in being with people. It can be in understanding. It can be serving coffee. It really can. Relevant experience is just about what have you done that kind of would key some way into this. My daughter, in her personal statement, now she's an ecologist, she's got a master's in ecology, and she goes out and she does ecology work. And during her studies, she went and worked in a coffee shop. And how does that fit together? Well, it's working within a team. It's understanding how to politely interact with people. It's being patient with certain people when they're difficult. And she was able to put that relevant experience into an ecology self-statement. So it's definitely there. And readiness to learn. Now, I'm speaking a bit about jobs and work and past training. And Rory's, of course, linking this into the personal statement when you are training. That readiness to learn never goes away. So it's not just when you're going into training that we need to learn. You don't stop learning. It would be great if you could just get to the end of your counselling training and could go, oh, well, that's that then. Now I know everything I need to know. Let me go out and apply my skills. We're learning all the time. Our ethical bodies call upon us to learn. So weaving in that readiness to learn is so important. How might you do that as a student, Rory? So how do you show your readiness to learn? Do you kind of recognize that you understand the training and how you might balance that? What's the process?
Yeah, I think that talking about feedback that you might have had in another course you've done, and how you've taken that feedback on board and changed it. I think a good one, if you're moving from sort of a certificate into a practice-based course, is maybe to talk about how you've developed your skills, and you've gone away maybe from being very directive to being non-directive, and you're very aware of the sensitivity of how to use questioning. And also, I think if you're taking that into a work role, you could talk about maybe the other things that you've done, other learnings that you've done, other courses that you've taken that have shaped your professional formation, as I sometimes call it, how you work. So I think that's it's really important, and I think it doesn't go. I don't think you can go far wrong if you're an eternal student, because we are all we should be eternal students. No one's ever the finished product. The journey never ends, and I think that an employer and certainly tutors are really looking for curious, open-minded people who are willing to grow within their role or to move into different roles. So I think stating your readiness to learn and what you've done in the past to show that is really important, as is an awareness of ethics and boundaries. Even a brief recognition that counselling involves confidentiality and professional boundaries can strengthen a statement. Even talking about maybe times where you've had to keep confidentiality in another role, where you can talk about maybe the relevant legislation, the UK GDPR, or you could talk about working confidentially in another role you've done. I think can strengthen a statement. And here's the thing: you will always get a question, whether it's a job or a course, on ethics and boundaries. You'll always get a question on that. So put something about that in. And also clarity and structure. Now, when I wrote this handout, I did laugh out loud, to be honest, Ken, because it said a strong personal statement is usually well organised, easy to follow, and written in plain and clear language. I suspect the one I put in was a complete smorgasbord of words, because, as everybody will know, as regular listeners to the podcast, I am quite badly dyslexic and really struggle with anything to do with writing. But I think my congruent sort of car crash probably won the tutors over on that day, and actually I'd train with them. But if you can, and I think this is important, if you can, try to keep it well organised, easy to follow, and written in plain, clear language. And if you do struggle, maybe reach out to the tutor and say, look, I have dyslexia. I'm happy to maybe even give you a verbal personal statement.
That's authentic, isn't it?
That is as authentic as it gets. And also, maybe like ourselves, with neurodivergence, maybe state that. And say, and maybe put it in, because I think that you have to bring all of you to the training, all of you to the work you do. And I think you can't get more genuine than saying, well, this is me. This is just how I am. And also, I think that you need to be a good fit for the course. So what does that mean? Well, I've seen quite a few personal statements, and it's at this point where someone writes something like, I really love cognitive behavioural therapy. I think behavioural change is really important. I'd like to help clients do behavioural change. And you might think, well, we run a person-centred course here. Is it that this course isn't the best fit for the person who's applying. Or I love the idea of, psychoanalysis and subconscious process. Again, is it the best fit for the course you're going on? And in the past, I've certainly had conversations with students and said, look, everything else really fits, but your desire, your interest doesn't lie within the modality of therapy we practice. And I remember saying to one person, I think you'd be a better fit for a TA course, to be honest. And she went and trained as a TA therapist, and she's still doing training now. She's doing brilliant with it. But it was a best fit. We see best fit for clients, and I think it's best fit for training. And this can be with jobs as well. If you're applying for a job and you say, "Oh, I really like, I really like talking a lot to people." If the job is working remotely where you don't see anyone, it might not be the best fit for you. So when you do write the personal statement, think about what the job actually asks you, or the role, and is it a good fit for you? And that kind of takes us really to the end of this, to wind down a bit. Points for practice is where we come to. I think writing your own words rather than trying to sound overly formal. It's not a formal application. It's not a legal letter. So make sure that what you write is showing who you are. Be clear about why counselling matters to you. This is equally as important in applying for a counselling course as it is to applying for a job. Show you understand the training is both academic and personal. Say that, yes, you want to engage with the academic work, but you understand the personal side, the working with clients, the personal growth is something that you're happy to engage in. Put some relevant self-experience and keep the focus on a readiness to train. Check that your writing is clear, concise, and well structured, with Rory's caveat, that if that is a struggle for you, then speak to the tutor. And tailor your statement to the course you're applying for. And I think if you did put in a good personal statement, it goes a long way to getting you where you need to be, whether it's on that place on the course, which sometimes can be very competitive, and equally in the world of work, where there may be lots of applicants for jobs.
If you're studying counselling, the student library from Counselling Tutor is like having your own tutor alongside you. Every theory and skill in plain English, mapped to your specific course and level. Visit counsellingtutor.com, click on the products tab, and select Student Library for more information. That's counsellingtutor.com. Final thoughts from me on this is, we started off this podcast episode speaking about AI. Here's one place you do not want to go to AI, because it's going to try and formalize it. It's going to try and write it in its structured manner. Write this yourself. Put over your true self and trust that the real you is good enough, whether that be for a job or for training. Just really be you. And the other thought I have on this is, it's important to get on a course. It's important to get on a good course, but it's more important to get on the right course that is the right fit for you. It's important to get work as a counsellor, but it's more important to get the right work, which is a right fit for you. We can be so hungry and desperate. I want to get on this course that we push past looking after ourselves in this. It's you and your practice, and it's about finding the right fit for you so that you are content and you're doing what you set out to do and you are matching your why. So my final thoughts on this is don't compromise with this. Really make it you, because the right you is good enough, and you will find your right place by being the right you. I mean, Rory, I just love your stories of your personal statement, and look at you now, and academic director of a counselling training, from dyslexic, messy first submission to academic director of a training organisation that's been running for over 10 years after being a tutor for years and years and years and years. You know, it's just about being your authentic self, isn't it, really?
It is. It is. And, you know, to paraphrase one of my favourite songs, you can be yourself, you can't be no one else. And I think it's true. And if you are one of those people who, like me, and I guess like Ken, sometimes struggle with formal writing and get your words muddled up and think, oh, I'm a bit thick, you're not. You just think differently. And what I would say is, you know, don't let this hold you back. Speak to the tutor. You know, if it's the job, maybe speak to the person and say, look, you know, could I do a verbal submission as opposed to a written one? Because I think I might come across better. You could even record it, I suppose, if they were happy.
Yeah, imagine make a video. Making a video and putting a personal statement, say, I'm not really good with writing things down. Here's a link to my video. Oh, my goodness. I bet that'll get watched. I bet it would get watched.
Yeah, I would start off with something along the lines of, you know, you asked me to write a personal statement. Well, I'm not too good at the old writing, but here I am. And I'll tell you all you need to know. And in our industry, I'm sure that would gain attention. And I also think that new media now is a mixed media in the way that people work in general is very accepted. So don't let it hold you back. I have to say I'm better at the speaking than I am at the writing. So let's be grateful, Ken. That's the job I do.
It's a good job, isn't it? Being on a podcast. Well, we don't write that many blogs, do we? We use researchers and writers for that on counsellingtutor.com. This has been episode 377. Just before I go away from that and hand over to you, Rory, this is another handout. So there's two handouts with this episode, so you can get this handout as well. Just go to counsellingtutor.com, click on podcast, episode 377, and you can get the handout on writing a personal statement put together by Rory. It's got all of the headlines that we have discussed today. And this has been episode 377 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, and we started off with ethical and sustainable practice, AI apps and depersonalisation in counselling, a conversation about what therapists have to think about if they're using AI apps and how it may depersonalise the relationship between you and your clients. It's food for thought, and it does come from Ken's book, which he mentioned in the podcast. In Practice Matters, an interview with Jane Godward and Tara Fox on their new book, Process of Becoming a Counsellor, Navigating the Transformation, a book, in my view, that should be in every academic library because it is just full of information for prospective therapists and also those who may be in practice. It's a good all-rounder, this book. And then to Student Service, How to Write a Personal Statement for a Counselling Course. Ken and myself went through the essential ingredients of writing a personal statement and also reflected on the fact that sometimes the word writing may be a bit redundant, where you could use other forms to show your eagerness and willingness either to go onto a course or to apply for a job. As always, we thank you for your likes, shares and subscribes. So until the next time, and as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.